Welcome, dear friends. In this module, we would look at the interconnections between digital culture, media, and literature. The questions which are raised by new interactive technologies have their precursors and echoes in the pre-electronic literary and artistic traditions. To some of these traditions, we have referred to in the previous module also. A very interesting question has been raised by Marie-Laure Ryan in her work Narrative as Virtual Reality, published in 2001. And she asks whether there is a significant difference in attitude between immersion in a game and immersion in a movie or immersion in a novel. So, thereby she wants to know what are the new possibilities for representation offered by the emerging technology of virtual reality. She also suggests that the culture of immersive ideals is now being shifted to a culture which is more concerned with interactivity. According to her, formerly we belonged to a culture of immersive ideals, for example, getting lost in a good book, but now we are becoming a culture which is more concerned with interactivity, simultaneous presence and participation through social media. So, the idea of virtual reality has now become a metaphor for total art. Electronic revolution of the past few years has resulted in new textual genres such as hypertext, electronic poetry and computer role playing games, etc. We also know that there have been various critical and literary theorists who have foreshadowed the quintessence of what we now call virtual reality, and we can particularly refer to the work of Baudelaire, Huysmans, Ignatius de Loyola. A central issue which is emerging in modern literary theory is the opposition between a presumably passive reading that is taken over by the world, which is represented by a text, versus an active deconstructive reading that imaginatively participates in the creation of a text. So, we are moving towards a different type of participatory culture as far as literary perceptions are concerned. Digital media is associated with deployment and communication, as well as flows, reimaginings, amplifications, erasers, and transformations of a wide range of cultural representation, experiences, and identities. The influence of the digital media has been extended to the heart of everyday life, most notably through the smartphones and the cell phones now. It has also helped in creating new collectivities, for example, webcam girls, gamers, hackers, and others whose sense of self, vocation, and group sociabilities are shaped significantly, although not exclusively nor deterministically, by digital technologies. The ethnographic approaches to digital media can also be categorized into three main categories. The first is the relationship between digital media and the cultural politics of media. The second is vernacular cultures of digital media, and third is the prosaics of digital media. This categorization is only provisional and remains evanescent with intersecting and overlapping boundaries. When we talk about relationship between digital media and the cultural politics of media, we normally want to find out how cultural identities and representations associated with youth, nation and diaspora etc. are being communicated, reproduced and subverted through individual or collective and participative engagement with digital technologies. Vernacular cultures of digital media want to find out how vernacular cultures are being manifested in various digital centers and collectivities. We also look at the examination of hacker communities, blogging, migrant programmers and internet memes, and how these communities are organized around the logic of digital media. Prosaics of digital media want to look at how digital media feed into, reflect and shape other kinds of social practices like economic exchange, financial markets as well as religious worships. So, attention to these processes, rituals, material, and social protocols illuminate how digital media is becoming incorporated into the social, cultural, as well as economic life of the people on an everyday basis. However, as I have mentioned earlier, these categories remain to be provisional and tactical, and the boundaries are also not watertight and compartmentalized. They can often overlap. If we look at a brief review of major studies which have come up on digital media, we find that several approaches become clear to us. Most of the studies started in the late 1990s on understanding cultural implications of digital media. As we started to enter the 21st century, we find that ethnographic research was carried on in terms of emergent digital technologies. At the same time, we find that in the path breaking research, Castells, Hales, and Turkle have talked about the new post human subject residing in a digital age or network society. The digital age has ushered in what is termed as a historically new reality. It is fundamentally altering the way we are born, we live, we sleep, we produce, we consume, we dream, we fight, or we die. So, it is concerned with questions of transformation and rupture. Other studies have been skeptical of the autonomous power of technology to bring about change, and some studies have also noted that instead of heralding novelty, digital technologies have been responsible for enabling social reproduction and expansive realizations of self and culture. However, we find that by the time we enter 2004, the popular hype about digital technologies sees a resurgence with the proliferation of Web 2 technologies. It is related with the emergence of contemporary social media, wikis, blogs, embedded videos, as opposed to the static web pages and message forums which were being maintained earlier. Social media is often extolled for social connectivity, for interconnectivity, flexibility, user generated content, creativity, and it has also allowed democratic participation for global population. At the same time, we find that people who started writing about the digital technologies and digital literature after the incorporation of the 2004 new technology, they started to talk about the liberating aspect of the Web 2 technologies and also focused on the digital divide. Ginsberg has investigated how digital technologies and media revives dated modernization theory and looks at the way the development projects are influenced as well as the agenda of different development projects can be influenced by it. He also investigates whether marginalized groups such as indigenous community etc. are excluded from scholarly accounts of digital medias. The techno-imagery universe of digital era and divides has the effect of, as Ginsberg suggests, reinscribing onto the world a kind of allochronomic chronopolitics, in which the other exists in a time not contemporary with our own. This has the effect of re-stratifying the world along lines of a late modernity, despite the utopian promises of a 21st century McLuhansk global village. So, we find that some of the critics are also talking about the global divide, the digital divide, which exists significantly in our world. The use of digital media for producing culturally and politically meaningful discourses remains significant. And at the same time, we find that questions of accessing it and the capacity to be able to use it are also associated with it. One requires a set of skills to be able to move over this digital divide, and one also requires a particular type of media literacy. Digital media cannot be the sole ground for producing a shared subjectivity or a new sensorium. These discourses are constituted by exclusionary practices, and despite various critiques, we find that digital media's role is significant in cultivating new communication models and modes of selfhood. It has also been successful in establishing collective interest as well as collective institutions. A very interesting work which we must refer to at this point is by Nora Almeidas. In her book Dismantling the Monolith: Post Media Art and the Culture of Instability, published in 2012, she has talked about digital pasts and digital futures. She says that it is not only the art that falls under the new media paradigm which is problematic, but it also renders various traditional assumptions about art as problematic. In a practical sense, we can say that the new media art raises certain fundamental questions about the nature of curation and preservation and the role of cultural heritage institutions as stewards of digital assets. So, as we are becoming digitally literate and we are producing more and more information using digital means, the problem of preservation of knowledge in digital medium and its curation has also become a problem now. Expanding concepts in information and media theory would help shape caution context and redefine approaches to preservation, but this should be viewed through the lens of what she has termed as a post media theory. She has also introduced the concept of new repositories. So, let us quickly scan what are the main concerns which have been raised by her. When she talks about digital preservation and archiving, she talks about the problems of curating and preserving artwork which is dependent upon technology. That means that she wants to talk about artwork which exists in digital formats. So, fields of art librarianship which are devoted to developing digital preservation strategies are yet to be disseminated. It has got its own challenges of archiving, for example, providing access to new media artwork and to protect it from different spams, etc. The directives which are traditionally given by various institutions in various countries, for example, still remain inadequate and are not able to look at different possibilities and challenges which are being presented in this field of curation. An examination of ideological frameworks which determine curation and preservation decisions therefore becomes necessary. There is also a codependence of new media art and theory. We can extol technologies as aesthetic viewpoints and incorporate cultural techno-speak into exhibitions. A technocentric approach to media preservation also remains problematic, as digital art is not static. It is not tied to a physical medium the way analog art is, and therefore, our understanding of preservation of new media becomes a problematic issue. So, there is a rupture between medium and apparatus which continues in a digital context as data diffusivity. Preservation decisions now must account for human questions of an artist's intent, material, conceptual authenticity and commodification, along with pragmatic questions of longevity and data authenticity. Role of mass media technology in matters of aesthetics blurs distinctions between reproducible commodities and fine art objects. We find that this particular concern brings us close to the concerns raised by the theoretician of the Frankfurt School of Criticism. I quote Ben Finnoraden in this context first. He says, works of locative media art are now indistinguishable from non-artistic management applications for the visualization and monitoring of certain data, and net art cannot always be distinguished from online content. So, the notion of artistic intention is deeply fraught in the age of digital media, because majority of the works are generative, interactive and algorithmic. We find that almost similar concerns were being raised, although in a very different context, by the Frankfurt School critics. It is digital, it is hybrid, and conceptual artworks contained in it may also be criticized often as being only useless. It has been termed as a media based typology and is still the de facto organizing principle for art collections and basis for curation and preservation activities. The post media aesthetics reflects a shift from media based typology towards a condition of general equivalency. There is a loss of media specificity and distinctions between commodities and fine art objects. Post media art is self reflexive, it subverts and appropriates functions of communication tool. New conceptual system which would replace the discourses of mediums therefore have to be considered carefully. The three features of post media aesthetics can be listed here. The first is replacement of media concepts by net culture concepts. The second is appropriation of mass media tools for art making, a shift to a user centric model of communication. The third is their developing impact on curation and preservation initiatives. The variable media approach also becomes important here because it is an inventive digital stewardship model as an alternative to media based technologies. New digital technologies have had their impact not only in the way literature is produced, but they have also impacted books as well as literary establishments. The 3 points which we can look at in this context is how technology changes the way writers write, the e-books and their market as well as the digital libraries. Technology has changed the way writers approach the task of writing. The focus now is not on writers' style of writing, rather it is on the process of writing. The process of writing has also shifted. There was a time when manuscripts were written by hand or they were typed using typewriters or other instruments, or typing on computers and laptops has also been replaced by speech to text softwares. It is interesting to quote Nietzsche when he had said that our writing instruments are also working on our thoughts. He was not aware of the shape technology would take. He was talking in the context of the writing ball which he had started to use while his eyesight started to fail. He suggested that writing instruments are not just conveniences or contrivances for the expression of ideas. They actively shape the limits and expenses of what we have to say. Not only do we write differently with a fountain pen than with a crayon because they each feel different in our hands, we write and think different kinds of things. This statement is very true even now. So, the writing instruments also reveal certain things about writing and change our fundamental perception of writing. Computers have changed literary style for individual authors as well as for the literary establishments. So, we can track changes about the history of word processing, for example. As far as the style is concerned, we find that it had been associated previously with the essence of a writer or the aura of a writer or the unique voice or peculiar feel of the prose of a particular writer. But now it is considered as a product of different influences, writing instrument, market trends, editorial directives, a writer's emotional and psychological state, contemporary times and much else besides. So, that is why people are interested in figuring out how computers affect style. So, we have started to look at what is known as stylometry, the academic study of words and phrasings, the way we use language to express ideas or thoughts. The use of word processing has also changed writing. It has also changed the nature of literary writing. Among other things, we can see that the revision of whatever we have written has also become convenient. In fact, revision and composition have become simultaneous processes now, and the distinction which used to exist between revision and composition etc., has been eroded. The early adopters used to work on WordStar, which was a word processor, but then these word processors have also become part of plot and settings, and they have started to change the circumstances of literary production. The impact of the word processors can be felt on what has been termed as the sense of the text. On a typewriter, writing happened only in the present moment. It used to happen line by line, paragraph by paragraph, so there was a sense of seriality in it. On the other hand, in word processing, the manuscript can be grasped as a whole simultaneously. It has been termed as a gestalt by some authors. The availability of search functions, the ability to rearrange sentences and paragraphs and recorded chapters or sections at will makes the textual field fluid and flexible. A potentially infinite expense, or at least limited only by the computer's ever expanding memory. So, we find that the computers generate and offer greater control over writing price. I would quote from Anne Rice, and she says, once you really get used to a computer and you get used to entering the information from that keyboard, things happen in your mind. I mean, you change as a writer. You are able to do things that maybe you never would have thought of doing before. So, computer changes the way we approach the process of writing itself. Christina has called this the sense of text, the mental model of the words on the page or the screen, and how the writer perceives his or her relationship to them. Word processing has dramatically altered the sense of the text, and how one approaches writing and what one thinks about the process of writing has changed. The use of computer algorithms to analyze text can also throw light on the specifics of how a particular writer uses language, which might not be possible through traditional methods and means of close reading. One can also measure the impact of technology on the literary style of a particular writer through big data approaches, and the analysis of works of hundreds of thousands can also be done easily. For example, we can detect the relationship between words and thoughts, find out the trace of word processing in writer's prose, how inbuilt grammar checks in word processing impact the prose written by a writer. Another aspect which has become suddenly important in our culture is the phenomena of e-books. So, there has been a dramatic change in the world of writing and publishing in 2010 and 2011, and it has occurred because of the rising popularity of e-books. There has been a hype about e-books since the 1900s. Sony and Waterstone's partnership over e-books in 2000 initiated a major change. The first e-book readers related to personal digital assistants or the PDA devices, pocket-sized electronics, became popular in the 1990s. So, the issues with early e-readers were related with low battery life and the difficulties which readers faced in reading the text. Gradually, we find that there has been a development of small and sleek models, and Apple iPhone and iPad have made the reading more comfortable on a small screen. Apple iPad offers more than 1.5 million books which have been downloaded within first month of its release in 2010. Its e-reading device Amazon Kindle was the most important innovation in the e-book market, which allowed Amazon to solidify its existing share in the book market. Other notable entrants in the market can also be listed. For example, Apple iBooks, Kobo, Barnes and Noble's Nook, Sony and Google Books. Kindle, however, has emerged as the biggest single retailer of e-books, and it holds 75 to 90% of the market share. It has got several million titles available on its devices which offer wireless connectivity, and therefore it is easier to download a book and access it on this particular medium. It is also inversely related with the sales of books in the print medium. The sale figures of the print medium during the time period of 2010 and 16 remain either stagnant or show a downward trend. Between 2012 and 2014, the market share of e-books has grown from 20% to 33%. E-books are now available in a fairly cheaper manner, and e-readers are also more convenient to carry, and thousands of books can be stored in one device. So we find that technology has changed the way in which writers write a particular book and also the way the readers access it. So we find that though e-books have a certain bias in favor of offering commercial or genre fiction or only the bestsellers to its authors, still it has given an option which has changed the manner in which people who are interested in reading books have changed their preferences. Research shows that because of the rise in digital, old school readers and dedicated readers of literary fiction in particular continue to value physical printed books. But the new generations, the generations of the 21st century, are moving towards the e-books only. However, we find that as far as the sales of literary fiction, pure classical literary fiction is concerned, there is a downward trend in the sale, whether it is in the form of a printed volume or it is in the shape of an e-book. However, we find that digital technology in publishing and retail proves a boon for the book market as a whole. Another way in which literature is preserved for posterity and it is preserved for circulation has also changed by the impact of the digital revolution. So now we are looking at the digital libraries, libraries which store literary material in a digital format. It is accessible by computers. Some computers can be accessed locally and others can be accessed through internet. So we find that digital libraries provide access to books to a large number of people with a certain ease. It has also resulted in a democratization of knowledge, and at the same time we find that the rare or antique books can also be easily browsed, and the danger of damaging the original, which was a difficulty in traditional library system, has also been countered. Libraries and institutions can also share important texts without shipping books. It is important at this point to refer to what is known as the Project Gutenberg. This is the oldest digital library which was founded in 1971 by Michael Hart, and the initial goal of this project was to put 10,000 of the most consulted titles in the public domain by the end of the century. We can say that digitization has been as much as a revolution as the printing press had been in its days. We find that by 2010, more than 30,000 public domain works were available for free download. The process was slowed because of manual copying until 1989, but we find that in the 1990s, scanners and text recognition software had automated the process of copying. So, page turning scanner machine, which was used by Stanford to digitize 1000 book pages an hour, abated the pace, and it is estimated that nearly all printed books could be digitized in the coming 50 years. Stanford's partner in digital library production is Google Books, which has scanned over 10 million books since 2004. Interestingly, it is not run by an academic institution but by several partners. And what Lyotard had said in his 1979 essay on the postmodern condition proves to be futuristic. Around 15% of all books which are available are free digital books, and millions of titles can be fully searched and downloaded. They also include in-print texts after publishers have made a deal with Google. Some texts may allow readers only to preview a limited number of pages, and often they provide links to publishers' websites and also to booksellers so that one can also get a physical copy. It makes the print books searchable, but at the same time we find that there are certain controversies associated with copyright provisions. It is true that copyright holders can get the snippets removed, and it benefits both the readers as well as the publishers. But Google's policy of digitizing books without looking into copyright claims and as well as accusations of being profited from other people's works are there. The violation of intellectual property laws has also been alleged against Google. We find that literature, culture and media are being reshaped by digital technologies. The basis of print in all these three domains is shrinking and gradually becoming redundant. Now, the questions we have to face is not about what the text says, but where is the text in new media, and these type of questions have become more significant. Digital culture has forced us to reassess how we read, how we write and how we assess. An interesting example is about self-publishing. Self-publishing in earlier days used to carry a social stigma as well as it was associated with a very high cost. But now it has become an increasingly popular option for amateurs as well as for professional writers, and it is cost effective. It appeals to authors who may have a niche audience or who want better control over their work. With the advent of digital media, old media industries such as the book industry are struggling to find ways to adapt to these changes. We can say that contemporary literary practice has responded to, and it is also shaped by the everyday language of the World Wide Web as well as media authoring tools and formats such as iPads, MP3s and Flash. To sum up, we can say that the digital revolution has changed the way in which we perceive literature, its product as well as its use, the way we look at culture and also the way we look at media. Our perceptions are being reshaped by the digital revolutions. Thank you.